welcome into the studio, man. Appreciate you coming by.
Yeah, big day.
Big day, bad day for the Mets with Justin Verlander and the news out there with the Terrace Major. You're shaking your head. You think it's not as bad as I'm saying?
No. I'm just thinking about Mets and Yankee fans today. This is the dichotomy of being one or the other is profound today. The Yankees, Cole strikes out 500 guys in 6 innings, and Judge
struck out 6 guys in the first 2 innings.
Yeah, he
which
had
is
10
a new record.
4.
Yeah.
And then Judge homers his first at bat, and that's the news out of the Bronx. And the news out of the Queens is Verlander to the DL. It's like I have a friend who's and so we have somebody here at OutKick that is big Mets fans, and they're like,
yeah, Gary.
Really?
Yep.
I mean, is this how we're going to start the season? But I wanted to quickly touch on the Verlander thing because there's a couple things to understand about this. First of all, the Terry's Major is not part of the rotator cuff. Everybody's always assumed that it was, or it's been talked about as it was, but it's a very rare injury. And it's potentially, I said earlier, my quote was potentially terrifying because there is no real cure for this. And if it is what they say it is, he's not throwing. The Mets are saying, oh, he's going to throw. Well, no, he won't throw at all. And I asked for the rubber band for this reason. If you think about a strain sounds very simple.
Yeah.
Sounds very
minor.
Right. And so what a strain basically is, so if this is the teres major muscle and it's behind the lat in the back of the shoulder, very intricate and very involved in the throwing delivery. But when you think about a strain, so if I pull a rubber band and I stretch it to the point where I start to break the tensile strength, that's a strain. Now, you can't see any damage, but there is damage to the tissue because it's less strong than it was before.
Right.
So there's a strain is actual physical damage. So there's damage.
But you didn't pull apart the rubber band.
Exactly. So that's the tear. It breaks, right? And so what you've done is you've loosened the strength of that muscle, which is a major piece of the delivery. And so you don't throw. You're not going to throw and be monitored, moderate throwing. You're going to shut it down. That's where when you're talking about pitchers and injuries, that's why there is no 2 weeks for a pitcher, right? He's going to be shut down for 7 to 10 days. Then they're going to re-look at it. And the MRI is such an inexact science that there's no telling. And all this is to say, I hope it's not what they say it is. I hope he's back soon because baseball is better for Justin Verlander being on the mound. But I think it's more like you're looking at 30 days as an optimistic.
Do you think 30 days until he throws again?
I think 30 days until he
could
possibly be pitching again. And to me, that's optimistic if this is what they say it is.
Well, and you couple this with Edwin Diaz. We talked to you about that with the closer. And they still have a lot of talent left. You don't have a $300 and almost $36 million payroll without having a lot of other guys there.
And
but
to that point,
it is a very Mets start to the season, what you were saying.
But here's the thing. As a Mets fan, I would be confident on 2 things. Number one, Buck Showalter was my manager, and nobody manages a roster better than he's the best I ever played for. And number 2, if your team was built around one guy, you weren't a World Series contender anyway, and they aren't. Scherzer's throwing lights out today. He's your ace. Verlander is kind of cherry on the top. And we'll talk about this later, but the unbalanced schedule changes everything, right?
Yeah.
The Mets are no longer playing the Braves 18 times. Now they're getting the Pirates and the Reds more, and so that's another big change. But this, if this ruins their World Series aspirations, then they weren't the team I thought they were.
Well, and so Steve Cohen, spending all this money. You got Rob Manfred talking about it now, Curt, where he's saying, I've been dealing with this since 1987 when I was first working with the league. This is nothing new, but when you push it this far, it's going to cause issues if it keeps going more and more. I also hear this story, and I think this is a reminder that I do think if you spend enough, you can guarantee some things. You're going to have enough talent to be relevant throughout the year, but it is difficult to just buy a World Series because of variables like this,
it's impossible, right?
And that's maybe a reminder that we're getting today with this news to a lot of people who maybe didn't understand that.
So baseball payroll disparity is Major League Baseball's version of global warming. It's been talked about forever. It's always been talked about as this incoming traumatic, degenerate problem, and the fact of the matter, it's not. If you look at the world champions from 1987, the year you mentioned, to now, it's as varied as anything, right? You can look at all the teams, and because I heard you talking about this earlier, all the teams at the bottom.
Those bottom 10 teams.
But you can go back in the last 30 years for the most part and find all 10 of those teams thriving and winning.
Yeah, they've all made a run at some point.
Right.
The Guardians won the division last year, which
I
brought up.
They did.
Yeah.
And But again, I think you're getting back to the point where I think payroll disparity is going to be less of an issue with because the change in the schedule is dramatic. It's very dramatic, and it's going to have a huge impact across all of baseball. I understand your point because that cost gets passed on to the fan.
Yep.
And as the fan, you can't go out and enjoy a Major League Baseball game for less than $500. Now, that's not true in all places, in Tampa and all the things that go with that. But baseball is also in a couple cities it shouldn't be in. And there are a couple cities like this one that should have a Major League Baseball franchise because of the fan base. Even though it was funny coming in, I'm listening to you guys talk about the NFL on opening day in baseball. Football is king here,
yeah,
and rightly so. But this fan base here has proven with the Predators that they can support and like
not just a football
over
team.
the top support.
Yeah,
because hockey here is phenomenal, and people that don't live here don't understand what the Predators have done.
Right.
So,
well, it's a great point. I want to get into that too about markets where we could see Major League Baseball sooner rather than later, because Rob Manfred's on record. They want to expand. They want to go into new markets.
They're going to Vegas at least.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a no-brainer, and it's going to happen at some point. But when we look at the payroll disparity, how much of it is, because I do think that, and I fall victim to this where, how are the Reds going to compete, and how are the Pirates going to compete? And we go, well, it's just the big bad Yankees or the New York teams that do this. But how much of it, Curt, is legitimately they don't have the funds to spend at that same level? And how much of it is just greed, where owners are saying, I'd rather make all the profit I can and then basically screw my fans out of a good product because I don't want to give that profit back to players and try to put a competitive team on the field?
The answer to that question is yes.
Yeah, that's what's going on.
Right. And
but do you think there's both of that happening?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Here's the thing. I was a player rep during the strike in '94,
yep.
and I was in labor negotiations with the owners. And I don't know if people here, probably a younger audience than remembering '94, but
I remember it well.
During the '94 strike and lockout, we were sitting across from owners who were telling us, "Give us, a salary cap. Help us stop spending money on you."
Yeah.
Which is kind of, okay.
Which is not what you want to hear.
Right. But at the same time, they're talking about payroll disparity and, these guys are doing this and these guys are doing that. During the lockout, Jerry Reinsdorf goes out and signs Albert Bell to a record contract. And then we're sitting across the table the next day and we're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And so they can't get out of their own way, number one. And number two, this could all be solved if you take all their revenue, put it in a pool and share it.
Well, and you've hit on that before.
And that's the greed part. They won't do that because can you imagine the Yankees and their multi-billions in revenue per year sharing with the Pirates who don't put that money into the payroll, or the Reds who have turned a franchise and a city, by the way, that was bananas for the Cincinnati Reds. The 70s Reds, the Big Red Machine, the place was sold out every night.
Yeah. Well, so you were a part of this with the negotiations as a player rep, and so you know this. The Major League Baseball Players Association has long been the strongest in sports.
Yes.
So I always compare it to the MLBPA is almost like the NFL owners, because the NFL owners have discovered
they don't lose.
Instead of taking this robber baron mentality that you see with Major League Baseball owners, where it's I'm going to get mine, you worry about yours, I'm going to spend what I want, don't care what you spend. It's more of a communal sense with the owners that, hey, if the 32 of us get together on everything, we're going to make a lot more money together, right?
Yep.
That's what you realize as a player rep with Major League Baseball. And those two sides fighting each other, I think that's long been an issue for the sport and the game.
Good for the sport, absolutely.
But how much could let's say Curt Schilling now is a part owner in a Major League Baseball team. Would your advice to fellow owners be, we need to unite a little bit more for the better of the sport?
Yes, but what happened in the NFL is unbelievably rare, right? But they've come to the realization that it's all, the Three Musketeers, one for all for one.
Yep.
If we win, we all win. And the NFL is and here's the thing. The problem is, from a fan perspective, it's a sport. From their perspective, there's nothing about it that's a sport. It's a business. It's a $10 billion+ a year business. And so that's which is fine. I don't have a problem with owners complaining about salaries as long as, because they're making money. You look at these franchise values are insane, right? I mean, the Ottawa Senators in the NHL are like this $6 billion franchise, and they were bought, pennies on the dollar. Baseball's the same way. These franchise values are going through the roof, and good for them. But you can't have both sides of the fence, and you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Well, so the Oakland A's and Moneyball, right? That's one.
That screwed it up for all the small market teams, by the
well,
way.
And speaking of small market teams, I'm looking at this list. They're dead last at $43 million, and that's $9 million less than the Baltimore Orioles,
right,
compared to $336 million for the Mets. So $336 down to the A's at $43 million. That's how big it is from top to bottom in Major League Baseball. But with the A's, I feel like at least the thinking was, boy, they're doing what they can, and at least they're trying really hard in their system and how they go about fielding a competitive team most years. Curt, do you think that every owner out there is really trying, or are there a couple of owners maybe that aren't necessarily tanking, but just saying, what's the least I can do to put a Major League team on the field?
Well, I think that's happening in Cincinnati. I think before Mr. Angelos relegated ownership or control to his sons, that I think he ruined that franchise in Baltimore, a city that deserves, and same thing with Cincinnati.
And two great baseball markets, right?
Unbelievably great baseball markets. And I think that's happened, but there is no accountability. You know, they don't have to answer to anybody other than fans, and for the most part, they don't really care. And then you have at the other end of the spectrum, you have the Cohen guys who cares deeply the only thing owners hate worse than losing money is bad PR. And so there are a lot of them don't want, and then there are others that don't care. The Kansas City franchise is owned by probably one of the richest men on the planet. They don't spend.
Yeah.
And but the fact of the matter is, I think the Oakland
basically sees it like an ATM.
Exactly. And listen, would you know who any of these men are if they didn't own these teams?
No, it's very unlike NFL ownership where you know every owner of every team.
And you do, because they're a prominent. Jerry Jones is the face of the Dallas Cowboys. What Major League Baseball owner is Mark Cuban's face of the Mavericks? What baseball owner?
Okay, so I want to ask you about Mark Cuban. I'm thrilled you brought him up. He wants to own a Major League Baseball team. He's long talked about it. When the Cubs were up for sale, he tried to get a group together to buy them. Right. He's talked publicly about if a team comes for sale, he wants to buy them. I look at the Reds situation where you have the owner last year challenging the fans, saying, where else are you going to go? Right. To everyone who wants to bitch and complain about us, where are you going to go here in Cincinnati? And I'm thinking, what if a Mark Cuban came in with his billionaire status but celebrity status and made moves for the Reds? Wouldn't that be good for the sport?
Well, I think it'd be great for the sport. But he is the antithesis of current ownership's desire for new owners. They don't want the guy that's going to step out of line. They want the guy that's going to fall in line.
That's a good point.
When the CBA, and Mark Cuban would be like, hey, listen, guys, we're making $10 billion a year. Let's just share the money. You might make $200 million less, but you're still making $1.4 billion, whatever. He's that rational, logical guy who brings to the party common sense at a party where there is none. And so the greed thing overweighs logic and common sense. And it's not just in sports, it's in all life, but in baseball, it's absolutely prominent.